I needed that time to grow and develop and fail on other people's dime. That's the great advantage of being in an agency, is you're not just on your own, and you're not usually kind of pushed too far out of your comfort zone because they want to get the best from you. But I think most designers reach that point 5 to 10 years in where they're suddenly thinking now, well, maybe I can do a more satisfying job if I'm freelance.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for joining me again on Lessons from a Quitter. I am so excited to have you here. I'm going to play around with the format a little bit over the next couple of months on some episodes. I am planning on talking a little more in the beginning. I am planning on having guests focus on one theme or area instead of just doing chronological stories about the way they quit. It won't be a ton of new things, but, we're going to experiment and see how we can make the show better. So I would love your feedback. If you love it or hate it, trust me, you won't hurt my feelings. Just let me know. I would love to make the show something that serves you better. And so with that, today I did want to talk about a topic that I've thought about for a really long time, and I've kind of tried to wrap my head around, and I will try to articulate it as best as I can. But I used to always wonder, you see this phrase, you are enough, all over the place, right? You see it on Instagram. People have paintings of it in their houses. And I never understood it for a long time. When I would see it, I would kind of roll my eyes and I would think, of course I'm enough. What does that mean? Enough what? I didn't think I wasn't enough. And I guess part of that is because I don't suffer from thoughts of worthlessness. I have never thought that I was worthless. And so I guess I didn't really realize that why people were telling me that I'm enough. And if you do suffer from those limiting beliefs, then let me be the first to tell you that you are enough. But what I have now found is that phrase really applies to all of us. And while I didn't think of myself as worthless, what I have found now is that, like many people in high achieving professions, I equate my worth with my productivity. I think that if you live in any capitalistic society, you've internalized this. We look very much down on people that are lazy and that aren't, constantly hustling or, trying to make the most out of every minute of every day. And so I never realized that these two things were kind of interrelated. But here's a quick test for you to figure out if you suffer from this. Think about the last time that you were sick or that you had to take time off. If you felt guilty for taking that time off, then you suffer from this. Congratulations. Now you know. Seriously, though. I had started seeing all over social media and with people that I was talking to, how many people would just casually talk about how they were sick and how guilty they felt for taking a day or two off, not even really thinking about that phrase. And it kind of struck me because I always feel like that when I'm sick. And I have this constant loop going on in my head when I'm sick that goes something like, stop being lazy. It's not that bad. Just get up. You're fine. And it's not until a couple of days after my illness when I'm feeling better and then I realize how terrible I was feeling. And I have to stop myself and think, why am I being so mean to myself? Why couldn't I give myself a day of rest without feeling guilty? I've realized that the reason for this is that so many of us equate what we do, how much we earn with how worthy we are of what we have, of love, of happiness, of security, of, material things we own, that we aren't inherently entitled to those things. We have to prove that we are good enough to have that. And I'm here to tell you that you are enough and that you do not need to prove anything in order to be entitled to love and happiness and fulfillment and rest. I mean, think about this. Think about the fact that even with vacations or weekends, like how often do you hear the phrase of like, I deserve this, right? Like we feel like we have to prove like, oh, I've worked this many hours, so I deserve this vacation, which is just an insane thing. Like, like the fact that we get some countries, like in America, we only get like 2 weeks off and other people get 6 weeks, right? And these are all just man-made numbers. And there's no level of like deservedness to get rest, right? You are like your birthright as a human being is to take care of yourself and to rest when you need it. And yet we have built in our culture that you need to prove that you are worthy of this rest, of relaxation, of enjoying yourself. Like if you're not working hard enough, like we have the work hard, play hard. We have all these sayings that have just been drilled into our heads. And I really want you to like take stock of that and realize, because a lot of what I see stopping people from taking the leap or thinking about what else they would do is they feel that their worth is tied into that job, into being the breadwinner or making 6 figures or working, having the title of a lawyer or whatever. And I'm sure that if I asked you, like, do you think because you're a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, like, do you think you're worth more than other people? You would say no. Like, having that title doesn't make you any more worthy than another human being, but it also doesn't make you any less worthy if you don't do that. If you go from being an attorney to any other job, I don't care, pick whatever job that you maybe quote unquote deem to be less. You're not less as a human being, right? These are all just like man-made, ego-driven status symbols. And the sooner you realize that you have that problem, the sooner you can decide to work on it and try to extract your own self-worth from what you do. You are not what you do, and you are worthy regardless of if you don't do anything. So I don't know if that concept helps you at all. It's mostly me just talking to myself, but I thought it was an important enough topic to bring up, so I hope you enjoy it. And with that, let's jump into the episode with Luke. Luke is a bit of a unique story for people that have been listening for a long time. We typically have stories of people who have become successful in one type of career and then quit and start in a completely unrelated field. They start over and there's a lot of, the stripping of identities and starting into something completely new. But I know that there are tons of listeners who love what they do, love the field that they're in. They may just not like the way in which they are working in that field. Maybe they're in a toxic work environment. Maybe they don't want to work for someone else. They want to work for themselves. They want more flexibility. They want to figure out an alternative way to do the thing that they actually love. And that is the cool thing about Luke's story, because Luke did go to school to be a designer. And after college, he went on to work for over 10 years at various agencies, design agencies, and he was doing design work. But as he will talk about, it wasn't the work that he found fulfilling or that he loved doing or that he went to school to do. It ended up kind of just becoming a corporate design job, and he was working on these big campaigns and he didn't feel fulfilled in the type of work that he was doing. So after a decade in those agencies, he decided to break out on his own, and he calls himself a funlancer, which I love. But we talk all about kind of that journey of switching from the employee mindset and going out on your own and being an entrepreneur and having to make it work for yourself, all the good and bad. He is now a graphic designer and art director. He devotes his time to doing things that he loves, like art directing magazines, lecturing at Birmingham University, and putting on incredible events like the Birmingham Design Festival. He has done incredible things, and I think that his perspective on how you can use the corporate world to help set you up to go on to entrepreneurship or to find the things that you love and how to get plugged into those communities is just such an important one for so many of us. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Luke. Hi, Luke. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I am honored to have you, and I'm so excited to jump into your story. We typically start back at what did you think you were going to do when you went to school? What did you want to do? And why don't you tell us like the first part of your career, what that looked like?
So I always knew that I wanted to be a graphic designer. I've never really had any other ambitions or any other options. It was all I've kind of ever been really good at. So I went through the fairly typical A-levels, and then we often did foundation years back when I was studying. So that was where you got to try all different things. And I kind of realized during that it was definitely design that I wanted to do. So then I did a 3-year degree, and I was really fortunate to do that down in Cornwall, which is a really beautiful, sunny, kind of a really lovely part of the UK. And that just completely transformed how I thought, and my ambition, and what we were exposed to there was really high quality, great design and design thinking. And so that just made me even more want to enter the industry. I guess I probably had some either misconceptions or naive ideals about the kind of work that I might end up doing. And I was very kind of a real purist. There were certain things that I really wanted to do. And then life kind of threw a different set of circumstances at me.
I think that a lot of people probably relate to that. I think with most industries, I mean, how can you know, before you actually work into it? And we tend to have like an idealized or based off of, TV or movies or people that we've seen. So what did you think you were going to be doing, and what kind of actually ended up happening?
So I really wanted to go and work for a boutique agency, maybe like 3 or 4 people. I'd be doing really creative, exciting, fulfilling work for really deserving and worthy clients, maybe charity-based stuff or third sector, so education and health. And I probably saw myself designing posters and album artwork and magazines and all of the things that I loved in design. I just presumed that there were loads of jobs out there for hungry young grads like me who I thought I was okay. So I presumed I could kind of just walk into one of those jobs. And the reality was that I was kind of entering the market at a similar time to when there was a big financial crash here, and the climate wasn't such that I probably could have pursued one of those jobs if I'd wanted to move to London, which is what a lot of people do when they finish uni. They kind of head for the biggest city around. But I didn't really want to go down that path. I was from the north, and I really felt that I wanted to make my name elsewhere.
And so where did you end up going after school?
So I ended up working for a company called Woolworths, which is it's just a shop. I basically applied to a few places, didn't hear anything back. And so had to take just some pocket money kind of work. And so I took that job for a few months, and I was really fortunate that I worked with a lady whose ex-husband worked in a big design studio. And that was just complete coincidence, the universe smiling at me. And she passed on my CV. And a month later, I'd quit, and I was working there at that company. So I was very fortunate that I had that kind of leg up, if you like, or push in the right direction.
Right. And what kind of design work were you doing at this place?
Yeah, so this was an agency called Linny Design, and they're a big, really established agency that were attached to a printer. So I was really fortunate that they had some huge kind of global accounts. They had big name clients that any of your listeners would have heard of. I was exposed to a really broad range of very high quality commercial advertising, marketing, design work very early on in my career. And I stayed there for 3 years, and I felt like that was very fortunate to be there because I learned a lot, but it definitely wasn't the kind of work that I thought I would want to be doing. I kind of still felt a little bit dissatisfied while I was there. And then in the job that I took subsequently, that again was very similar. I just found that I was not kind of scratching all of the creative itches that I had.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think this is something that so many of us go through when we're in school, thinking that many of us go into a profession because we want to either help or do something that we feel fulfilled in. And then we get out into the real world and we realize that maybe, that's not as possible as we thought, or we end up in a job where on the outside, it sounds like both of these agencies were great agencies and you were doing great work, but there is that part of you that isn't fulfilled. And I think a lot of people feel that. A lot of people feel guilty for not feeling satisfied. Like, I have this great job, I should feel great. During that time when you're saying that there was, this itch that wasn't being scratched or that you had this, like, did you have any inklings of how you would maybe pivot in order to satisfy that, or what you wanted to do next in order to deal with that?
Yeah, I had a very kind of short-term, unstrategic approach to that, which was I knew the sort of work that I wanted to do, and wherever the opportunity came up for me to do that outside of working hours, I just said yes. It was very organic. It wasn't like a 10-year plan to go freelance or anything like that. I presumed I would always be working in agencies. I just kind of climb the ladder, do my 30, 40 years or whatever, and find creative satisfaction outside of that. Maybe I'm doing a disservice because a lot of the time, maybe I should have been creatively satisfied in work. Maybe I was a bit of a square peg in a round hole. But I quickly found that the work that I did outside of work hours was much more fulfilling and satisfying. And maybe that's because the pressure was different and I wasn't always being paid for it, or I was just doing it for the love of it, or it was work that I felt much more passionate about. It quickly kind of became this weird thing where I would go to work, get paid for doing design all day long, and then I'd be itching to come home and do another kind of full day's worth of work at night that maybe I wasn't always being paid for, but it was work that I loved and believed in and was really passionate about and enjoyed. I was kind of stuck in that limbo for a number of years, not kind of knowing where it would go.
What kind of work was that? Like, what was the type of design work that you were really passionate about doing?
So it just so happened that it was all kind of the same kind of work, and it was all magazine work. And I'd not kind of specialized in editorial design. I'd always loved magazines. I'd been really fortunate to grow up around with magazines in the house and National Geographic and that kind of thing, but it was never something that I thought about as a career. But I had friends who ran a small studio in London called Boat Studio, and they were starting a travel magazine. And they just approached me because they'd seen another project I'd done for a friend of mine. They didn't really have too much editorial experience either. So they just said, look, we're going to do this magazine. Do you want to be our designer? I just said yes, because it sounded like a really exciting opportunity. I had zero idea whether I could actually do it, and kind of learned on the job. That was really fulfilling and exciting. And we got to travel and meet some amazing people and have some real adventures within design, which for me at the time was a complete antithesis to what I was doing during the day.
And as you're doing this, I know you mentioned that you were kind of just taking these things on because it was fulfilling. But at what point did you really start thinking, maybe I can just do this? Like, maybe I don't have to have this agency job.
Yeah. There were a few kind of key moments. So Boat Magazine was featured in Creative Review's annual, which was like their roundup of the best creative work of that year. And that was a real kind of high point for me, because that was probably the most recognition and reward that I'd seen for any of my work. And that got me noticed by Monotype, who are a huge type company that own, a big portion of the world's fonts. And they asked me whether I would pitch for a redesign and relaunch of their magazine called The Recorder. Even just to be invited to do that, that was alongside some absolutely phenomenal designers. And that was to be paid to design that magazine, which I fortunately somehow won that pitch and worked on that magazine for a number of years. And it was while I was doing that, I realized that maybe there is a way to get paid to do the work that I love. And that could mean that at some point I could leave the security of the 9-to-5 behind.
When you were doing this as a side hustle, did that ever interfere with your work? Was there any restriction? Because I know in some industries that you maybe aren't allowed to do things on the outside.
Yes, I had to have that conversation with my bosses every time. I was really fortunate that they all saw the benefit to them. They understood that the work, the recognition was good, and that they could maybe use that a little bit as part of the agency story. So certainly at one point they freed up a bit of my time to work on it, which was amazing, kind of unheard of thing. And it also improved the work that I was then doing during my day, because I had the freedom and I was encouraged to just produce really exciting work, I guess, for those magazines. I think that definitely improved my game during the day. It definitely at times made me a bit more tired. And I think there were a few times where I just had to kind of refocus and remind myself that I couldn't let one derail the other, because there's a tension there. And I was very fortunate to be allowed to pursue these kind of extracurricular design jobs. I think if there was a strong conflict of interest, they would have said no. It wasn't the sort of work that the agencies would have taken on, because to them it was quite small, not huge paydays, that kind of thing. Whereas for me as an individual, it was massive. For a number of years, I was able to kind of juggle the two without too much tension arising.
Yeah, I love that. And I think your story for this podcast is actually a little unique, because typically the people that we have on quit their careers and go in a completely different field. It's people that just weren't satisfied in the field that they were in. But why I love your story is because I do think there's a ton of people who, went into a particular, because they have a love for it and really do love it, but may not love where they are or the type of work that they're doing. I mean, I love the approach that you took. I think doing it on the side to kind of see where it goes, so that there isn't the pressure of maybe like creating a business right off the bat, or knowing, even like kind of gaining clarity. But when you were going to make the plunge to, become a freelancer or create your own business, having done this on the side, I mean, did you feel like, okay, I can do this? Or was there still fear of like, I'm leaving behind this stability to try something that who knows?
Major. Yeah, I still feel that fear. I think there was a few kind of big milestones or things that I knew had to happen first. So my wife and I were buying a house. In this country, your mortgage is very dependent on the kind of stability of your wage. And they look at the past 2 years' wages, and the kind of received wisdom is that you don't quit and go freelance if you then want to buy a house. You kind of have to do that in the opposite order. So we'd saved up largely through the kind of extra freelance work that I've been taking on, as well as my day job and my wife's job. So we bought the house, and it was only after that I kind of felt, okay, now is the time. If I'm going to do it, I should do it now. And I'd also had about 10 years experience in the industry by then. So I kind of felt like, certainly not that I'd made it or that I was any kind of pro level designer, but I did feel like I wasn't learning new things during the day. And so I kind of felt quite stagnant, and I felt like I was starting to resent the job and the work that I was doing, and I wasn't putting my kind of talents to best use. At the same time, the company was going through some changes that I was at, and it just kind of all felt like, wow, this is falling into place. It's suddenly viable for me to leave. I got this client who had promised me more work in future. So I kind of knew that I wasn't just jumping into the deep end with no kind of safety net. We bought the house and spent some money doing it up. So it just kind of felt like there was enough things saying yes, that now is the time to give it a go. And if it didn't work out, I could always just go back to a different agency. It wasn't kind of a complete shot in the dark. And I'd had enough recognition, and I'd kind of grown my own network and base enough. I'd seen a lot of other people go freelance with a lot less experience. And so it was fear that was holding me back, pure and simple.
Absolutely. And I think that it's such a good point that comes up a lot, is that, a lot of times we have this overwhelming fear, but when you really break it down, the reality is you can just go back, if it doesn't work. And I think sometimes we make it as if like, it'll be the end of the world if I do this. And I love that you realize that. But I know a lot of times what stops people is the fear of like all of the stuff that they don't know, right? Like you may know design, but there's a whole business side to it. And a lot of times people feel like, I don't know any of this. And so how did you kind of grapple with that?
I think I've been really fortunate that a lot of the freelance work that I'd done kind of on the side, I'd been project managing, I'd been kind of client liaison, I'd been doing bits of strategy. There's certainly skill sets that I don't have. So I don't profess to be a digital designer. I don't really touch web design. I felt like my kind of soft skills and my networking and my communication was okay. And so I got enough of the boxes ticked to have a go at freelance. It didn't feel like such an alien step, because I'd kind of purposefully been pushing myself to get better at those things. I'd had to have a tax man, help with finances, because I was doing enough freelance on the side. So there were certain kind of bits of that puzzle that I thought I can probably wing it and learn. I'd got a lot of freelancer friends who were kind of giving me advice and saying that I would be able to do it if I just jumped in and gave it a go. So I definitely didn't feel kind of super confident that it would be easy, but I felt like it was the right time to try. And I'd really be annoyed at myself if I didn't, because I would never know whether I could have had a much better work-life balance and been much more satisfied and happy, and kind of said goodbye to some of the stress.
I mean, that's such a great point, because I think building up so much resentment and bringing so much unhappiness is a lot of times there is that itch, and just seeing if you can do it. Like, you just have to give yourself that kind of that opportunity to see, like, can I do this? Because you'll forever wonder, like, what was around the corner? Yeah.
I'd never been that person that was like straight out of uni I knew that I wanted to be my own boss and that I wanted to be free. And, I actually knew the opposite. I knew I needed to learn from people, and I knew I needed to just kind of get a real grounding and improve my confidence. And, in lots of ways, I was really shy when I left uni. So public speaking and that sort of thing just wasn't my cup of tea. And actually 10 years later, I'm doing lots of that, which is completely alien to who I used to be. Right. But I needed that time to grow and develop and fail on other people's dime. That's the great advantage of being in an agency, is there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of help. You're not just on your own. There's a lot of experience that you can draw on from other people, and you're not usually kind of pushed too far out of your comfort zone because they want to get the best from you. But I think most designers reach that point 5 to 10 years in where they're suddenly thinking now, well, maybe I can do not a better job, but a more satisfying job if I'm freelance.
And how has that jump been? I mean, all the fears that you had, like, now having gone through it and kind of being on this side, do you have more work-life balance? Is that fear, do you see like, oh, it was overblown? Or was it like, no, this is really scary?
I think some of it was definitely justified. So I think when things are going well, it's the greatest thing in the world, because you feel like you're your own boss and you're riding the wave and nothing can touch you. And then you maybe have a quiet period, or a project goes a bit differently to how you hoped it would, or just certain things can derail you. And, as most creatives, we have really sensitive egos, and our confidence is maybe wafer thin, that we, appear to have it all together. But underneath, we've all got this imposter syndrome, and we're kind of paddling like swans under the surface. And so I've definitely encountered those kind of highs and lows over the last 2 years. I was really fortunate that when I left the stability of full-time work, the day I quit, in fact, I was offered a part-time teaching gig at a local university that I had some links with. Although I'd never had any teaching experience, I said yes to that because I loved mentoring students and helping juniors at work. So I kind of felt like it would tick that box in terms of community and the feel-good factor. And it also gave me a little bit of stability in the month. So even if I got no work that month, the bills would still get paid. And we wouldn't be kind of kicked out of the house, that kind of thing. So that was really fortuitous, and I'm really thankful for that. And I've maintained that over the 2 years. I've changed how much time I spend doing that, because it doesn't pay incredibly well, and it is quite a lot of hard work, but I still find it hugely rewarding and enjoyable, and it kind of feeds into the other things that I do. But it's definitely been a learning curve. I feel like I'm only just getting started, and I'm 2 years in. Enough work has come in that has meant that it's financially viable to carry on. And I'm definitely so much happier. Like I look forward to leaving the house to go and do design that I care about every day. And that didn't used to be the case. And I feel like now I know, although the pressure is as intense, it's kind of self-imposed, and it's if I haven't worked hard enough, or if I haven't been proactive enough, or whatever it is, that maybe I'm to blame. Then I can't just kind of put it at someone else's door and say, oh, it's because X, Y, or Z. It's actually, oh no, it's on me. But I've been really fortunate that I've had some really fantastic clients, and I've worked with some lovely people, and I've kind of connected with a really great copywriter who I worked with for a time in agencies, and he's kind of freelance now as well. So we're doing bits of work together, and I'm involved with some big design events that happen in the city. So I've got kind of the camaraderie and the kind of what I missed from agencies. I found that in different ways, and I found those support networks, and I've managed to match that with enough work that I love doing. Yeah, I'm probably the most creatively satisfied I've ever been.
There's a couple things I actually think that you mentioned that are super important. Yes, like obviously there's a ton of pressure, and it's a different type of pressure. But I think when you're saying that, like, it at least gets balanced out with being creatively satisfied and fulfilled, at least like the upside is so much more. And so one of the things that you just mentioned that I really wanted you to touch on, because I think a lot of times when people leave for entrepreneurship, especially, it can be a very isolating experience. And it's a lot of times you're working from home, you're alone, and you go from being in a office with a ton of people. And I think a lot of times people don't prepare themselves for how isolating that can be. And I have seen that like you clearly have a very connected community, and you do, like you were saying, you do these festivals in your area and you teach at a school and stuff. And so can you talk a little bit about how you kind of started building that network or how you saw the need for that?
Again, I don't think it was intentional. I've always believed in, it sounds very kind of high and mighty or lofty. It's not really, just this idea of giving back. There's an amazing tradition within design of designers kind of lecturing and doing free talks and little bits of teaching and that kind of thing. And I always just kind of appreciated that that was part of the cycle of things. And if you were ever in a position where you were invited to speak, like what an amazing honor that people might want to listen to you and think that what you've got to say is worth listening to. So every time, there's not a huge pool of designers here doing high profile work. So at the time, maybe 5 years ago or so, I started being invited to speak at events. And I was absolutely terrified, not a natural public speaker, way out of my comfort zone. But I just said yes to the first one and thought, well, I'll give it a go. This might be a good thing for my profile. I was still full-time working at the time. So I just did it, and it went okay. I felt horrendous, but had nice feedback. And then I was asked again, maybe a few months later, to speak at something else. I thought, well, I've done it once. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I just said yes to every opportunity. I was invited back to my old university and some others to do some talks and stuff. So I just kind of, I guess, started growing my confidence. It still doesn't feel comfortable. It feels important and it feels worth my time and worth the stress. Through that, I met a lot of great people who were also part of the scene who care about giving back and, just doing the extracurricular stuff, the stuff that you don't have to do, but that makes it a better industry for everyone. And, I'm certainly not the only person doing that. There's people all over the place in those kind of positions. So just realized that was probably my tribe or my group that I ought to at least have a foot in, because when you work somewhere, you've got your work friends, you've got your outside of work friends, you've got your uni friends, you've got all these different groups. But it definitely became clear there was this group of people who were like-minded and that they were the people that I should probably be part of. And so when my friend Dan, 3 years ago now, suggested that we start something bigger in the city, it was just apparent who we should be working with. And that was why he approached me. I'd spoken at things and he was aware of me and my network. And he was doing similar, but with different people. So we were just like, yeah, this is an opportunity to put our mark on the scene, to give something back, to help our area achieve a bit more notoriety. And, I really care about education. I care about the young people that I teach. And part of the reason why I think you choose to go to a certain city is you look at the city as a whole and you think about, is this going to be a good ecosystem for me and my course and what I'm passionate about? And so for us, a big part of that was setting up a big citywide design festival, because that would be something that people could look at our city, Birmingham, and say, that's a really great reason to study there because there's clearly a really vibrant scene. So that's what we've done. And we spend a lot of our time doing that. I probably spend a day a week doing that. Dan gives similar amount of time, and we have a really great team and then volunteers. And it's just a hugely rewarding thing to be a part of. I appreciate not everyone listening to this will have either the opportunity or the inclination to, start something as big as a huge festival, but there's always classes or groups or meetups or talks or whatever it is, just that little bit of networking, although that's a word I don't really like to use, just like making friends with people, just finding like-minded people. I think if you have a vocation or a career you really care about, you naturally want to meet more people that have that same love as you.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, but it's also, I think it requires like pushing out of your comfort zone to do those things. Like you were just saying, you're not a natural speaker, but when you get the opportunity, you realize like the importance of kind of putting yourself out there. And we so often, just because something is uncomfortable, we shy away from it. So I think it takes a lot of courage to say like, I'm not going to have the confidence until I keep doing it. You're saying like you started getting more confident because you did it a couple of times. And we're so often waiting to like have that confidence and then go do it. And that just doesn't work that way.
I don't think many people are naturally so confident that they could just get up on a stage and talk to hundreds of people and not feel terrified. I think it's very abnormal if that's the case.
Absolutely.
And people say to me, like, how do you get better? Oh, as if like maybe 2 talks in, suddenly it clicks and you're a pro. And for me, I always tell people, like, maybe every time you do it, you'll be 1% less nervous, or like 2% smoother, or whatever it is. But it's like incremental. As with anything, you have to practice, and you have to usually do a ton of whatever it is to get good at it. But if you're being invited to speak to a small group of 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever people, that's a really great opportunity to practice, and not make a fool of yourself in front of the whole world. And so when you do get invited to speak on a stage to 500 people or whatever it might be, you've at least kind of had your bumps and scrapes. You're not failing on the grandest stage possible.
Absolutely.
You feel at least half prepared.
Right. You're taking baby steps. I mean, nobody wants to be kind of thrust onto that like world stage. You have to kind of build up to that. But even what you were saying about the Birmingham Design Festival, I mean, I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like that's probably not going to be like a huge moneymaker for you guys. It's something that requires a ton of work, and it doesn't really usually result in.
I don't mind saying this. I'm very transparent about money stuff. We've broken even for the past 2 years, which was really only our aim, because we intentionally set up to do things very differently to most big conferences, because both Dan and I feel very strongly that if you're charging $1,000 or £1,000 a ticket, there's only certain people that can go to that. It's usually big business sending some of their staff, paying for their tickets, and they're the people that probably need it the least. It's the students, it's the graduates, it's the young professionals in their first few years. I could not even afford, a £200 ticket at that stage, let alone 1,000. So we make as much of it as possible free to attend.
That's incredible.
It's not unheard of, but it's very rare. That means that we rely hugely on support, whether that's from local businesses and brands that are on board with that mission, or speakers who come and donate their time, which is incredibly generous, or our team and our volunteers who give up their time, as do Dan and I. So it's been hugely rewarding already. So it's really not about the money. And at some point, maybe it will make money for us, and we can quit our other jobs and do it full time. But certainly at the minute, it's massively fulfilling.
Again, that's the point. That's what I love about what you're doing in your story, is that when there's something that you love, I think so often we're waiting for permission, or we're waiting for someone else to do something, or we're looking at things of like, maybe there isn't like a huge ROI in the traditional sense of like making money, but like you are plugging into a community, like you were saying, you found your tribe and you're trying to make that tribe better, and you're creating a space for other people, and you're doing something that's going to draw attention to your city and bring other students there. I mean, it's giving back in such a massive way, and hopefully it'll pay off, in spades for you, and you will make tons of money from it in the future. But the point is that like people, like you were just saying, you can do that with meetups. You can do that if there's something that you love. Like you're obviously pouring a lot of time and energy into something that, because of that fulfillment, because I think so often people get really caught of not knowing what they want to do next. But if you kind of see where those interests are, and that tribe is, and that inkling is, and just get involved and do what you can and give back and try to like help, it has a funny way of like leading you on that path that you should be on.
Definitely. And I think for us, there was also a small selfish element, which was we are absolutely passionate about the industry. We hold, tons of designers in really high esteem. And we just wanted to connect with them. We wanted to learn from them. We wanted to be friends with them. We wanted to bring them to our city and spend time with them. And so for us, putting on an event and inviting them was just a really great excuse to do that. As simple as that, if you were a huge football fan or sports fan, the opportunity to hang out with your favorite team would be like priceless. And for us, it's the same thing in design, that of course these are only people, but they're people right at the top of their game who have had amazing careers. We can learn so much from, and we can call them friends now, many of them, that's priceless, really is.
That is such a huge point. And I think maybe we should unpack that a little bit, because I think people are so caught up on what they know how to do and don't know how to do. And I think one thing that often gets overlooked is like, you can be a curator of something you love. Like you guys clearly are designers, and so you're in that industry. And so, but even creating this, like you said, is a way of connecting with people that you want to connect. But even if, let's say you love wine, or you love, like you were saying, football or whatever, like you can start creating something to connect people that you would have no other reason, let's say, to connect with. In all honesty, that's why I did the podcast. I get to reach out to people that I would have no other reason to reach out to. And I get to sit and talk to them for an hour, and it's purely selfish reasons. And I'm so glad that people get something out of it and that I can help other people. But it's also a way of me like curating conversations about a topic that really intrigues me and like getting down to why people do the things they do. And there's so much opportunity for that now with like the internet, whether it's a podcast or a show or a meetup or a festival or, you know, like just a weekly dinner at your house or whatever you want to do. If you're like trying to think about the community that you want to be a part of, and you can create that.
It's incredible. I don't know if it's always been that way, or if I guess it's to do with the intersection of like technology and slightly more flexible working patterns now, and how we're all connected, but also so disparate that there's this, you know, drive for real connections again and community and hanging out in person in real life. But obviously it doesn't have to be that. And like you say, so much of it is technologically led, which is amazing. Like I'm talking to you now and we're in different countries, which is, you know, it's insane. We need to be making the most of the tools that we have available because, you know, we all know about the damage and the, you know, the crap that they can bring to our lives and how they can make us feel rubbish and imposter syndrome and all of this stuff. But the flip side is that they are such a powerful tool for connecting us, and that can just be online, but it can also aid the offline stuff. Like so many of my friends in the industry I've met through social media or through events or through things that a generation ago, those people probably didn't have access to, or those things just didn't exist. And it is such a privilege and a joy to be able to connect with people, to see people inspired, not by me, but by people that we've kind of found. And like you say, that curation idea, it's literally the highlight of our weeks and our months and our years. We'd do it even if we had to pay people to let us do it. You know, it doesn't matter whether we get paid or not. And that's the beauty of freelance and flexible working, is that I can make in a few days what I used to make in a longer period of time. And then I can spend the rest of my time doing whatever the heck I want for free, doing events or teaching or, you know, whatever it might be. So that's certainly for me where the privilege and the joy of freelance has really informed that stuff, because it's changed the way that I live and work.
Totally. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I have had the same experience. And I think maybe it's hard if you haven't really put yourself out there to use social media or use the internet in a different way. I think a lot of times we just tend to consume content and we're just scrolling and we're just looking. And once you start engaging, you really realize the power of it and how quickly you can get connected with people that you wouldn't, like I said, never have a reason to kind of be connected to before, and how quickly those relationships emerge and how fulfilling all of that can be. It's just that you have to put yourself out on that playing field. Like it's not going to just happen.
You're right. And I think it's that thing about not just being passive, but about being active and being brave enough to be part of the conversation. And that doesn't have to be like, you don't have to tweet your biggest design hero and be really annoyed if they don't reply, or, you know, whatever it is. You have to have realistic expectations, but equally, if you're not in the conversation, you're not even there participating and investing your time and getting to know people. And I see that stuff as just, it's not even giving back to the scene. It's just kind of being part of it. That inevitably leads somewhere, whether that's just new friendships and relationships and advice. And, you know, we've got a whole industry of people at our fingertips that are giving and sharing and inspiring and, you know, giving their tips and tricks and techniques and everything away for free, because it's just what we do. And I know that might not be the same in every industry, and design and tech and all of that is kind of very reliant on those tools. But for me, it's been invaluable and a real delight just to see how that stuff works. And you see the people that you would want to spend time with, or you see the people you think, wow, they're always helping people, or they're always contributing, or they're always sharing great stuff. If I like them online, I'll probably like them offline. And then you hang out with them or you invite them to your stuff, and hey presto, you've got a new friend who, you know, you would never have known before.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I know you've mentioned a couple of times imposter syndrome, and I think, you know, we talk about that a lot on the podcast. And I think it's easy for someone to even listen to you and say like, well, yeah, he had 10 years of experience and he was asked to teach, and he clearly like, you know, knows what he's doing. He's kind of gotten to a higher level than, let's say, a beginner. But let's say when you're putting this design festival together, did you still feel like, who am I to be doing this?
Completely. And we still do at times. We have to like look back and remind ourselves of the success to be like, oh, no, it's okay. We can do this. And, it wasn't just me either. We had a team of about 10 of us sat around the table to begin with, that we were dreaming and planning. And, it was a year of hard work that no one saw before the first event. And certainly in that year, it was at least a day a week of mine and Dan's time, at least, like getting up early every morning, emailing people, like just so much boring admin behind the scenes. From the outside looking in, stuff can look really easy. Usually there's a ton of hard work that's gone on behind the scenes somewhere in prep. And people don't always want to see that, or don't always maybe notice that, or we love the idea that stuff just happens and it works. And that's so rarely the case in my experience.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you being so honest, because that's one thing that I really like to highlight, is that I think we think that once we get to a certain point, then we'll have that confidence, or we won't feel that way. And the reality is we all feel that way. And you keep having to remind yourself, like, I'm allowed to do this, because there's so much chatter in the brain of like, this isn't going to work, or who are you, or you're going to be embarrassed. And I think once we can kind of realize, and once we talk about it more, and I know with social media, not whether people are doing it on purpose or not, but it is like the highlights. And so it looks like, oh, this person has these gigs and is teaching here and is talking and has everything together. And the more we realize, like, no, that person still goes through the like self-confidence valleys of, what am I doing? Massive. Why would I do this?
We found that even with the kind of the biggest names, the people, all the pros that we've had to come and speak. This year, we had a theme for the festival, which was truth, because we felt really passionately that we didn't just want to put all of these kind of best of greatest hits, superstars. That doesn't help people. I think that just incites envy in people and jealousy, and like, well, it's all right for them, but they don't understand. And actually learning about people's struggles and process and their journey, you see the reality of like hard work. They're just turning up and putting in the hours, and maybe the bits of luck or the bits of privilege or whatever it is that's kind of led people to where they're at. And the best talks that we had were the most honest, the most raw, the most kind of rough around the edges, unpolished, unprofessional, if you like just real. And I think that's what people crave now, and I guess always have. But we've had this kind of sanitized, polished, like you say, highlights reel version of everything for so long, that actually people just desperate for some reality, and for them to know that they too can succeed if they just carry on. And even just changing our ideas of what success is, that it's not necessarily about the biggest payday, or it's not about the biggest platform or recognition or follower count or whatever nonsense metrics there are. It's just about being happy and helping people, and feeling satisfied with your work and making connections with people.
Absolutely. And I think the more honest we all get, I think it really opens space for these conversations to really help us reevaluate, like, why am I going for more money? Or what, like, what is the thing that's actually going to make me fulfilled?
Or why do I feel inadequate or unable to do this stuff? Like, because so often we just see the good bits and the bits where success, and you compare that stuff to your warts and all experience and, confidence dips and those kind of things. And when you realize that those people have that stuff too, they've just taken the step and they're just maybe 2 or 3 steps further on than you suddenly realize that can be you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's like the entire, honestly, point of this podcast, is to just show that, like, we're all struggling with the same things. We all have the same fear. And it's just a matter of either like pushing through it and doing the thing that you want, even though no one's giving you permission, and, your mind is screaming at you to stop. Like, you just kind of do what you deep down in your gut that you want to do. So I love this. Do you have any parting wisdom for somebody that's maybe where you were, that's wanting to jump, but it has that fear about, going out on their own? Any words of advice?
There's lots of practical things that people said to me. So about like building up a financial cushion, having some clients that are going to stick with you, not having any kind of huge bills looming. So like making sure that your equipment's up to date, and just like having a broad network of people that you can rely on, maybe having someone that's giving you kind of mentorship, plugging into a community. So all of that stuff, I think, is probably common sense, and is certainly within design. That's everyone knows that stuff, but you still have to do it. There's often a huge amount of pressure or a huge amount of expectation that if you're a good designer, you can just go freelance at any stage. And I see students coming out of uni and even, other people will say to them, like, are you going to get a job or are you going to go solo? And I feel like I just want to tell people, just wait, just like have patience, learn and make mistakes in an environment of safety and of nurturing where you can fail and it's not going to cripple you, and you're going to have support and you're going to grow. And, for me in my industry, that means just spending some time in an agency, just seeing how it's done. And for me, that was 10 years almost. For other people, it may be 5 years, it may be 2 years, it may be 20 years. I don't know. But I would say that is the most valuable thing. You learn so much from just observing and, how to pitch, how to present, how to order a presentation, how to, all of these things that you just don't get taught that stuff necessarily. And so you learn that on the job. Bide your time, wait, but kind of get to a point where you really feel that this is a good move for you, not that you feel like you've got to do this to prove a point that you can do it. Also, don't burn your bridges. It's such a small industry. We see that time and again, that everyone's got big opinions, and certainly on the internet, it's so easy to voice them and to just be the clever, snarky one, shooting things down. But in fact, that's really shooting yourself in the foot often. And your reputation is your most important asset. Whether you're a great designer or not, people will want to work with you if you're a good person, if you're easy to work with, if you're kind, like if you're consistent, if you're a good communicator. So really working on not screwing up your reputation because, they take a lifetime to build and they take seconds to destroy. And news travels fast. It's a small boat that we're all in. And so just, being the sort of person that you would want to work with, just focus on being that person, learn as much as you can, fail as often as you can on someone else's pay. And then when you're ready, take the leap and see if it's right for you. And if it's not, that's fine. I know loads of people who've gone freelance and decided they hate it and they've gone back to agencies. That to me is success, that they figured out what's good for them. There's no kind of one size fits all thing. It's just finding what works.
I love that. Absolutely. I mean, take risks, see what happens, and then pivot. I mean, it's just redefining and honestly, like reframing it for yourself. Like we all have to reframe this ridiculous notion of success that we have. And I think it is a success to try things and see like this one worked or it didn't. And okay. That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Luke, for joining us. Where can people find you if they want to see your work or reach out?
So all over the usual social medias and stuff. It's just at Luke Tonge, which is Tonge, and luketonge.com is my website, which has got links to all of that stuff on. Yeah, find me on Google, whatever.
Great. Yeah, I will link to all that in the show notes. Thank you again, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on.
How great is Luke? I love talking to him. I love his perspective. And here are my 3 takeaways from the conversation. Number 1, I know this has been a takeaway from a lot of podcasts, but I just want to reiterate it every time. Everyone feels like an imposter. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, how many years you've been doing it. When you're switching to something new, your brain is yelling at you to stop. And it makes you feel like you don't know what you're doing or people are going to find out you're a fraud. And we all feel like this. So knowing that, hopefully it'll empower you to realize that you shouldn't just stop because you have that feeling. That feeling is not going to go away until you actually start doing the thing. 2, get involved in your community, whether that's the community at work, whether that's your hobby, whether that's the business you want to start. We're not meant to do any of this alone. And you will be really surprised pleasantly at how quickly you can find your tribe and get people to help you and how much that will propel you forward. And number 3, have patience. I loved his advice about biding your time in these workplaces. A lot of times when we are unhappy in a role, we're looking for the quickest exit. But sometimes it does you well to get the training, learn what you need to learn, figure out the business, make contacts so that when you jump, you're in a better place. I hope this episode was helpful, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.